Our relations with China go back decades. In the 50s, there was a sense that African countries were part of this third world, a new order that was fighting against colonialism, and we shared a similar history with China, which had also fought against imperialism. And this shared history and this shared sense of struggle meant that even from those very early days, there was a sense of solidarity. There was a sense that we could support one another to achieve our development goals and achieve status in the international stage. You had Chinese medical workers going into Africa. You have the often cited Tazara Railway, where Chinese laborers helped to refurbish the Tazara Railway and helped to lay this very important piece of infrastructure that supported Tanzania-Zambian development. For me, what's exciting is that we're seeing a pivot. We're seeing not just state-organized engagement, but you're seeing more and more private firms, especially technology firms like Huawei, Transsion, Chuanyin, going into Africa, investing into Africa. You're seeing manufacturing firms setting up in places like Ethiopia, creating jobs. You're seeing technology transfer. You're also seeing young Chinese people increasingly going to Africa, traveling the continent, working in startups, setting up their own firms. And so for me, that's exciting. And similarly, Africans here in China are no longer just students. You have Africans who are setting up businesses in places like Yiwu, Guangzhou, here in Beijing, and creating really thriving communities. And so we've seen an evolution in this relationship. China's growth has presented an alternative form of development to African countries. China is an inspiration to many countries. It has risen out of poverty at an incredible speed. It's used technology, investments in infrastructure development, and has shown that that is a real viable way to grow and achieve societal development. And so China's growth, I think, has pointed the path for many African countries to see how investments in education, investments in infrastructure specifically, and using technology such as e-commerce can create millions of jobs for its people. And I think many African countries have started to embrace this form of development, are engaging with China. The Belt and Road Initiative, I believe, provides a very exciting opportunity for African countries to attract Chinese financing into infrastructure development in order to support manufacturing, in order to support intercontinental trade. Now, the African Development Bank has estimated that Africa has 170 billion in deficits in infrastructure. There's a need for power plants, roads, transportation networks, and the Belt and Road Initiative provides this opportunity to address some of this gap. When it comes to the issue of debt diplomacy, of course, we don't want any country to be overly burdened by debt. However, I think it's false to think that China is providing loans with the intention or part of this strategic plan to seize assets. Deborah Brautigam, who is a leading professor and researcher on China-Africa relations, the head of the Johns Hopkins China-Africa Research Institute, published a paper where she had studied over 3,000 cases to see, does this debt diplomacy narrative actually bear out? And the truth is, it doesn't. China is not using loans in order to seize assets. The question is not one of just debt, but are the loans that are being taken being used wisely? Are they being used in a way that can help countries grow? And I think the onus is actually on the African governments to ensure that these loans are properly structured, are properly financed. And so when we use the term debt diplomacy, I think the narrative is one that does not actually bear support from the facts.